Hello and welcome to Better Under Pressure. I'm Sara Milne Rowe, author of The Shed Method and founder of Coaching Impact. And in this podcast, I talk to leaders from all walks of life about being better under pressure and using pressure for better. I want to explore how we handle pressure in a world that is becoming more and more complex, the impact that pressure has on our ability to perform at our best, and what we do to be better under pressure.
So my second child, my son, was born, he was very unwell, in and out of hospital, and for various reasons the then leadership team of Ali Pali, of which I was part, left the organisation all at the same time, and there was this real clash of pressure. So pressure on me to be back at work and to take on the £27 million restoration project of the theatre, alongside having an unwell child who literally hadn't slept since he was born, and it had been quite traumatic. So that experience of my two worlds colliding at such a pivotal point for both, that's definitely the most amount of pressure that I've experienced.
Today I'm talking to Emma Dagnes, Chief Executive of Alexandra Park and Palace, an iconic public building towering over North London that is over 150 years old, was the original home of BBC television, and is now home to world sporting events, indoor and outdoor concerts and festivals, a theatre and even an ice rink. It's also where I happen to have pushed buggies and walked with my family and my dog over the last 25 years. Of Emma's 25 years working across entertainment, recreation and leisure, both in the public and private sectors, the last 12 have been at the Palace, helping to lift the organisation to be a recognised and respected cultural destination. Before becoming CEO, she led the growth of the trading subsidiary as managing director, and then became deputy CEO of the charity overseeing an award-winning restoration that cost £27 million. In our conversation, she shares how she learnt that her dyslexia was a superpower, why the original Alexandra Palace Theatre was worth its multi-million restoration, and the impact of seeing your purpose play out every day. Emma, thank you so much for joining me on this Better Under Pressure podcast. And I am so excited about talking to you, fundamentally because I can look at Alexandra Palace practically out of my window, and I regularly walk my dog at Alexandra Palace. So it means a lot to me, that whole area. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very special.
Yes, so special. But well, I know because you showed me around, what was it, like 2 weeks ago? And I was incredibly impressed with the expansiveness of that building. There is so much that the public don't see, which was fascinating to me, to say nothing of the sort of history and the stuff that's been left behind and the legacy to do with the BBC, etc. But because our conversation is about pressure, I would love to start with a simple question. What does pressure mean to you?
So I think, I'm quite a high energy person, quite positive person. So I think ultimately pressure is positive in my life. I sort of feel pressure almost like a physical force that's behind me, pushing me forward. And I've always enjoyed pressure, like even from quite a young age, and putting myself in sort of situations that were well out of my comfort zone, and sort of still doing that, today as well. And so I see it as a positive in the main. I think where it becomes potentially negative is when it almost physically feels like it's holding me back, or even pushing me backwards. And that's the difference. So I can tell when maybe the pressure is sort of tipped into that negativity rather than the positivity, quite starkly.
Yeah, and I love that description of almost like a pendulum, that it's either behind you or it's enticing you. It feels very alive as I can see it literally, like pulling you.
Yeah.
And do you feel that? I mean, is that is it a physical thing, or is it a well, you tell me, how do you experience the pull and the push?
I think for me it is physical. because I sort of almost feel like I am constantly moving forward. That I'm not somebody who necessarily looks back too much. I think also when it's a negative pressure, I can feel my energy levels dropping. I'll definitely feel it in my body more. The shoulders might sort of drop a little bit, and I can feel that ache coming across the back of my neck. You can really feel that coming out. So I suppose in that sense, it's quite positive for me because I'm able to then calibrate, because it's such a physical force in my life that I sort of know when I'm in a really good place with it, but I also know when maybe I need to take a bit of a step back, maybe just think about what's going on, why am I starting to feel this sort of downward pressure rather than the momentum pressure, and then I can make some changes, or sort of, I don't know, take the dog for a walk, or just do something that takes you out of that moment to sort of give yourself some time for thinking and reflection. But that's sort of how I approach it.
I'm interested in this relationship with pressure that feels incredibly positive, motivating, and you've talked about like a forward energy. Is that something that you learned at a young age? What happened for you that allowed you to have that clarity around what pressure is doing for you?
So I grew up in Norway, and I grew up with parents who ran their own business. It was very much a family business, very entrepreneurial. So I sort of saw, what it took, what hard work looked like from sort of day one. And, I think when you see that as a young child and you see what sort of pressure looks like for your parents when they are trying to build a business and all that brings, you can almost, again, you can feel it. So there was something in that. And then when I was my mum's a primary school teacher, so that was her original training. And when I was about 8, she noticed that I was, approaching learning in a very different way to my peers, and that I was, really struggling in some areas of my learning. And sort of around 8, 9, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And, in a sort of real, incredible show of parental love, my parents, who didn't have a huge amount of money, just sacrificed everything to send me back to the UK with my mum and go to a special school which could support me with my dyslexia, and sort of give me the tools that I needed to build my confidence and really, tackle the world, despite the fact that I sort of felt like, I was probably the slowest. That's how I felt about myself at the time, that I was always the bottom of the class, that I couldn't really catch up with my peers, that I always seemed to be failing at everything. And then, when I went to this school, and it was really showing to me that there was absolutely no reason why my dyslexia was going to hold me back. And if anything, it was a superpower, and I could harness it to really drive myself forward. So there was that sudden sort of impetus, this sort of energy in me, which is like, actually, this is going to take me further. This isn't going to hold me back. And then there was also the fact, seeing the sacrifice that my parents had made to send me to this school, that all through my life has driven me. There's definitely a sense in me of, wanting to show them and wanting to prove to them that all the sacrifice was worth it. And that's not, for me, it's not a negative pressure. It's a really positive pressure, because it's always pushing me, to see what more I can do, and where I can take myself, and obviously now the organization that I lead, further and on to bigger and better, brighter things.
There's so much in there, Emma, that I want to highlight, but there's a couple of things. One is that whole idea of going to a school where you are celebrated for your dyslexia, and having people around you that are saying it's a superpower. The impact of having those people around you and the whole system supporting that it seems like it's an incredibly powerful influence. And this, is that right? Is that how it felt?
Absolutely, because also I was surrounded by children who also had the same challenges, and they were doing great things, and they were being really successful. And of course, they had a great alumni program, so people would come back and talk to us about what they were doing, and they'd gone on to do great things. So there was just never this sense that it was going to hold us back in any way, shape or form. Incredibly empowering.
And then your parents, and the sacrifice that you feel they made in the spirit of you. And that's such interesting, because that plugs straight into sort of purpose, in my words, purpose energy beyond self-interest, that. And it's funny actually, because we did some work. We do quite a lot of work in schools, and when you're helping, I'm thinking of a particular school that we helped with year 11 girls before they were going into their exams, and the pressure that was influencing their ability, or so the head thought, in terms of them showing up as their best. And when we were doing some work with them in terms of helping them create some sort of deliberate practice that allowed them to, manage themselves under pressure, one of the really, really powerful mantras for them was, I'm doing this for my parents who, because a lot of them were living as second or third generation in England, and they were basically doing it for grandparents that had sacrificed loads to send them. It was incredibly strong for them. I'm doing this exam for my grandmother. I'm doing this exam for my parents. It gave them a different reason to choose to be in control.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sense of doing something beyond for yourself is incredibly important. And now I have children, it's very much about what I'm doing for them as well. And my daughter also has dyslexia, and so what I'm incredibly proud of is that at no point in her life has she had a moment of even what I had where she feels that she's inadequate or bottom, because we've always talked so positively about it, and she's known so from so early on. So again, that idea of you're doing it for something that is greater than yourself is really important, and it's also a major motivator for why I'm leading a charity, and why it's so important to me that we have we broaden our beneficiaries, and that we are accessible to all, and we're continuously challenging ourselves on that point.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, it's not by chance, I'm sure, that you've chosen to look after such a cultural jewel in a way. Restoring and retaining such an incredible building, and helping it survive. I mean, that's a beyond self-interest cause, isn't it?
Yeah, because you can you can physically see the impact it has on people's lives. When the pandemic hit, we very quickly pivoted from being a major cultural entertainment leisure destination to being one of the largest food distribution centres in North London. We lit the Mast blue every night during sort of key points in the pandemic, and we had people writing in who were saying to us, I've just come back from a hideous 18-hour shift in A&E in a local hospital, and as I've been driving home, I've seen that blue mast, and it's motivated me for the next day. And you get this you get fed these incredible positive impact stories, and it just makes you want to go on and do more and reach more people.
Yeah, I can absolutely feel that, and I can understand it. I mean, just walking around it the other day, I could feel it. So tell us about the pressure of being a CEO of that jewel, Emma.
Yeah, I think it's complicated. Is what I would say. Definitely never a dull day, never the same day. I think, at the core, our purpose is to enrich lives through great experiences forever. And that does obviously mean that we have a high volume of people to the Palace and Park every year. We're sort of 1 million that come for experiences, mainly within the building itself, and then about 3 million that visit us for other purposes, including maybe like yourself, just coming for a dog walk or a run in our park. And so there is, there's an accountability there. There's a responsibility for safety, not only, and also obviously for their enjoyment and ensuring that they have a great experience with us, that they come back, but also that they tell other people about us, and that's a positive conversation that they're having. So more people will want to come and experience what we have to offer. And so in all of that, you're dealing with the public, you're dealing with quite a complex stakeholder environment and landscape. And then you're leading this extraordinary team of people who are just so passionate and committed to what we are doing and what we are delivering. And they really do bring the most incredible positive energy to Ali Pali, every day of the week. And I think it's also important to note that we are pretty much a 24/7 operation. So there's no such thing as Monday to Friday at Ali Pali.
No.
We open the ice rink at 6 o'clock in the morning and it closes at 1 o'clock in the morning to allow ice hockey. So we have figure skating in the morning, ice hockey until 1 o'clock in the morning. Then we have, the theatre, we have the Great Hall, we have the park, we have the tenancies in the park. And that can mean that we're doing multiple activities, multiple events all through the day, but then breakdown will happen through the night. So you then have people on site that you're accountable to, responsible for. So it's never, the lights are never off. And that in one sense is pressure because, as the CEO of that organization, I'm never off. But that's part of the role. That's part of the role of operating and being a custodian of such an iconic place.
And so how do you actually connect? I mean, like there must be times when you are feeling right at the end of that pressure coming up to push you back rather than the pressure coming to push you forward. When you recognize that, what do you do, Emma? Because, that is an incredible accountability that you've just described there. And you're running, a family and everything else. How do you do that? What are your go-to practices or, ways of your conditions that actually allow you to stay so alert to something like that, to running a business that has hours like that?
I definitely get my energy from people. So for me, spending time with the children, playing a board game, going out walking the dog, just sitting around chatting to them to find out what their day has been like. And and they're great because they do, they like to talk, my kids, so they will tell me every single detail of their day, which is just fantastic. Also, having an incredibly very supportive network, and being very fortunate that I've got a very small group of women who I've known, we went to school together, so I've known them from sort of from the age of 11, and no matter what time of day, if it's sort of hitting the fan, as they say, you could always call and somebody's going to pick up the phone and have that conversation with you and know you so well that you can have those difficult conversations with those people that you're really close to. And also, I really enjoy walking. I like being outside. So my poor golden retriever gets dragged across all sorts of walks, left, right, and centre. Sometimes she gets a bit grumpy and won't walk anymore. So yeah, I just find ways of sort of building my energy levels back up. And I really enjoy listening to podcasts. I'm not a big reader for obvious reasons, probably, but I do love listening. So I listen to lots and lots of Audible books and podcasts. And I do tend to be doing something at the time, though. I like a bit of DIY. And my husband has come home on 2 occasions and found the kitchen in the hall. So, there are times when I tend to, my distraction might not be that, might be a bit more demolition than it is productive, but yeah.
Gosh, that sounds like it works for you. It feels like you've got it down in a way, this way of understanding how you operate, being on most of the time. Are you ever off?
I think my husband would say no, but I think I definitely can. There are definitely moments when I can completely switch off, and I think for me that is when I take the dog for a walk, because it's just peaceful, and I really enjoy her company. She's a lovely golden retriever, and I can just not think about anything really in that moment. I might not even listen to a podcast, just walk and be in my own thoughts, and I'm very comfortable with that as well. So but it's interesting what you said about, it sounds like you've got it down. Not always. And and there still will be moments when I won't feel like I'm as in control as I would like to be, or as relaxed as I would like to be. But that's definitely part of who I am, and so at least I'm comfortable with it. And I think you learn, don't you, over years of experience as well.
I'm sure that's true. And if you have got this way of operating, which feels incredibly energizing and interested actually in what it is that you're doing, and you've said you had people in your, it's run by people that have chosen to work in Ali Pali, presumably for the for the purpose and the mission. How do you manage it when they're under pressure? I mean, I think sometimes, often conversations I'm having with people, you know, they feel fine. Maybe a leader feels absolutely okay about it, but there are other people that they're leading that are under pressure or feeling high challenge. What do you do as a leader when you're managing people that are experiencing pressure or challenge in a way that's not as galvanizing as yours? How do you lead them?
I'm fortunate in the fact that I've worked with my sort of senior leadership team. I've worked with for quite a few years now, so I know them very well. So you can tell, you know, you can see the signs of when somebody's maybe feeling the pressure. And I think it's important to, you know, have the conversation and actually acknowledge it. So I think sometimes, you know, it's very easy for senior people in particular just to sort of gloss over it and move on and just sort of say, oh no, we just need to keep going forward, you know, do more, be more, etc., etc. Whereas I like to take the time to sort of step back and say, right, talk to me, you know, talk to me about what's going on. How are we going to, you know, how do we think we can alleviate some of this pressure? What are we actually going to not do? You know, I'm a big believer in, you know, not doing things actually. You know, there's no point in having, you know, 1,000 things on a to-do list, because the reality is you're not going to achieve any of them. You know, you have to whittle down and really get your priorities right. And that also alleviates pressure. So a lot of it comes around communication and then working through the challenge together to understand how we can alleviate and how we can help and how we can resource better to allow people not to feel negative pressure. Because of course, you know, pressure can, you know, as we talked about, can be positive as well. But if it's starting to impact on people's lives in a way that is not helpful, like losing sleep or, you know, feeling anxiety or whatever it might be, then you do need to take a step back and really look at where those pressure points are coming from and how you can alleviate them.
I think it's important to pause here for a minute. I'm curious at my own response as I hear Emma say how she has to be on, running a charity establishment that is literally awake and running 24/7. Because usually when I hear someone say that, I immediately feel concerned. And interestingly, I'm not feeling this with Emma. In fact, I'm feeling her invigoration and I'm intrigued to understand what she's tapping into. What provides her with that positive, forward momentum to lead herself and others in an establishment where the lights are never off? She says she actively chooses to build her energy levels back up. So what is it that Emma's actively tapping into here? Well, what stands out for me is the energy that she clearly gets from others, what I call people energy. Emma knows that she gets energy from being around people and actively taps into that. She mentions her team, her family, particularly connecting with her children, and being part of a group of friends who always have each other's back, whatever the time. This requires her to be present to those people in her life, another thing that can get compromised when we feel under pressure. When in our head we have a never-ending to-do list, it's counterintuitive to lean into others and believe that we can refuel by being present to other people. But it works. I know, because I've had to really try hard at this. And another key thing that stood out for me is when she said that she was a big believer in not doing things. Asking what we're not going to do and getting the priorities clear. Actually, interestingly, the word priorities was non-existent before 1940. It was a singular word, meaning only one thing to focus on. Somehow, we've managed to make multiple things a priority. This principle of focusing on what not to do is a deliberate practice, and one that we see many leaders struggling with. It takes effort to resist the temptation to keep adding things to the priority list when we're under pressure. It takes effort, and that effort requires energy that too often busy people don't have enough of. Morton T. Hansen found in his research on qualities of productivity with over 5,000 people in businesses that a standout quality was their ability to, as he calls it, do less, then obsess. I love that Emma insists on doing less, actively resisting the pressure to go faster, and instead steps back and asks, what are we not going to do? It sounds like you're alert to other people's pressure, that you can pick it up through their signs.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can sense
what are the sort of signs that you pick up as a leader?
for me, there's a lot in body language, and you can tell, I'm quite attuned to how other people are holding themselves, how they're speaking. If somebody's sitting in a meeting and you sort of see them wringing their hands, or they're touching their face a lot, or shuffling papers, or maybe not even 100% focused, seeming slightly distracted. All of those are tells for me that something's not quite right. And also that point around just asking,
Yes.
just be brave enough to ask the question and be comfortable with whatever comes back as well. Because in the past, I've worked in lots of different sectors, and I know for certain that there was times in my career, particularly when I was relatively young, where I was under phenomenal amounts of pressure and stress, and it was very obvious to anybody who was around me and was actually taking the time to notice that that was the case. But you know what? No, not one single person ever asked if I was okay. And I think that experience actually sort of showed me what bad leadership looks like, and what I wanted to be if I ever got to that point is a leader who is alive to not only your surroundings but your people, really alive to your people and what's going on with them, and how you can help them to grow and and find whatever it is inside themselves to do even more, and really kind of expand into the world, but without feeling anxiety. Or I talk a lot at our staff meetings about how back in the day, certain particular role I had, I used to wake up on a Monday morning and almost throw up because I didn't want to go into work. I felt absolutely dreadful. I was so stressed, so much pressure, so much anxiety, and this is when I was in my early 20s. And I never want anyone to feel like that who's under my leadership. It's fundamental to me. No one should be waking up feeling like that. So I do talk a lot to people and ask them how they're doing.
Well, I think that's, I mean, I really celebrate that, Emma, because I think other people that often sometimes teams that we work with, the leader's under so much pressure that they haven't got any energy available to them to lean in to find out how to support anybody else. It's not necessarily because they don't want to, it's because they haven't got the bandwidth to even think about doing it. So what I'm really intrigued about listening to you is you have obviously a very finely tuned system, operating system of your own. And interestingly, I'd like to go back to that actually about the worst pressure you've ever been, but it feels like you've had some hard yards that have grown some pretty important boundaries in terms of how you protect that energy so that actually you can be there for other people in a way that obviously from your story, other people have not been there for you at quite a young age when you've been under that sort of pressure.
Yeah, and I call it passing the crap down the line. So the idea that as the boss, you send an email at sort of 9 o'clock at night on a Friday, knowing very well that this problem is not solvable over the weekend. So all you've actually done is passed your pressure on to somebody else who's now has their weekend ruined and is going to be sitting there hand wringing because they can't necessarily get this problem solved over the weekend. So that ruins their weekend. It ruins the time with their family or their own time that they were planning for themselves. And then they come into Monday feeling dreadful. And I don't see where the positivity in that is. I don't see what the purpose is. So, we try, even though we are a 24/7 operation, we try very hard, as a leadership team in particular, not to send emails unless they are absolutely operationally paramount and maybe even like an emergency or something. We do not send emails late at night. Because it's not helpful. It's not helpful for somebody to be checking their phone at 11 o'clock and see that they've got a load of new emails. That's not going to improve anybody's productivity.
And is that a sort of principle or value of your establishment, Emma, or is it just a known thing? I mean, how formal is that commitment?
It's not a policy as such,
Right.
but it's what I would call an encouragement. And I do test it at times. I will ask teams and staff, as I always talk about walking the four corners, what the email burden is, and whether it's impacting them in a negative way. And I'm pleased to say that I get very positive feedback to say, oh no, everyone's only sending things they absolutely have to. So, I'm not a big fan of telling people. We're all grown-ups at the end of the day, so we know that this is the right thing to do, and so ultimately that's what we should be doing. And I'm pleased to say with my leadership team, they've absolutely bought into it.
You said something just then about walking the four corners. What do you mean by walking the four corners?
So I'm very on the floor at Ali Pali. I'm a great believer in being in sort of visible leadership. I didn't go to university. I started life out working as a temp, and I was sort of a temp during the day, and I cleaned tables in a very dodgy nightclub in Bayswater in the evenings. And so there aren't many jobs at Ali Pali, probably apart from in finance, that I haven't actually done. So I think, and growing up in Norway, I can ice skate and all of that sort of stuff as well. So I think it's really important that the staff and the teams see me and know that they can come and talk to me, and that I'm very approachable, that I'll listen to them. Listening's incredibly important when you're operating a venue and a heritage site of this scale, and action as well. It's not just a case of sort of listening and then walking away and pretending you haven't heard it. You actually have to take these matters seriously and see what can be done to improve whatever it might be that's been brought to your attention. So it's not about getting in the weeds. It's not about meddling. It's not about being in the detail. It's just about showing up, and making people know that it matters to you, they matter to you. And so that means that it will matter to them as well.
I love that. And that must be quite expansive, the amount of people that you're connecting to, because there's obviously the people that are running it with you, and then all of these other people that are coming either to perform there or to be there or visit or whatever. So you must have an incredible turnover of people coming through that building, Emma, all the time. And do you have how does that pressure flow out to you in terms of the people that are, like the darts, like the snooker and all of the other things that go on in Ali Pali? What do you see that being a people person, is that something that gives you energy, or do you have to limit your energy around that?
You have to limit your energy around it because it's constant. So it's not possible, for example, to go to every single event that Ali Pali does. But I certainly try and go to, I go to the darts for a session, and if I can, I'll go to one of the snooker sessions. I certainly go to a lot of the live music. Obviously you're hosting clients, you're hosting interested partners and stakeholders. So a lot of life is spent at Ali Pali, but it's an exciting place to be. So it's not a bad gig.
No, I'm sure not. And in terms of the theatre, let's just talk about the theatre for a second. I'm interested to know about the pressure of all of the bodies that are keeping an eye on you. So that there's a lot of what I think is intriguing about your sort of role is the fact that it's public, and the fact that you have so many different sort of councils and boards and haringey and all of the other things that go on that. I mean, I know when I work with leaders that have councils and boards that they're reporting to, that's just like almost another job on top of what they're doing. How do you manage that? And is that, what's the relationship to pressure with that body of stakeholder involvement?
I think what's important, so we have quite a complicated governance structure at Alexandra Palace, and and last night actually I was at our what they call the Statutory Advisory Consultative Committee meeting, which is, you have the consultative committee, which is made up of local associations that have special interests in relation to Alexandra Palace, and then you have the advisory committee, which is made up of representatives of all the local residents associations alongside councillors who sit on both of those committees. So I think if everybody was to turn up to these meetings, you would have maybe 55 people in the room. And I think the important thing to remember from my perspective, and it is something I have to remind myself of, is that each of those people are representing their own organisation, and so they are seeing that meeting through that lens. And so you could traverse an extraordinary amount of topic in one meeting. You get asked questions that are, very specific, like, something to do with the grass seed in the park, for example, all the way through to vision and strategy and everything in between. And I think, what's important about those meetings is that I take the time to really prepare for them, because ultimately the people in the room are volunteers. They are giving their time to something that they believe passionately about. There is this, sometimes there can be a tension between the relationship of the charity as Ali Pali, sort of the perceived impact we might have on our local community, particularly when we have large scale events, and who they represent in the community. And so it's incredibly important that I never come across as defensive and try very hard. But when you're passionate about something, it's quite easy, isn't it, to be very defensive? So you're not defensive, and you're open to questioning, and you try, and then be honest when you don't have the answer. So there's times when I get asked a question in that meeting and I genuinely do not know the answer, and I am not going to make it up on the spot, and some people maybe would, but I certainly don't. And I will always say, I don't have the answer now, but we will absolutely ask the right person in the team, and then we will get back to you, as soon as possible. And I think, that helps as well, allowing those questions to flow and nobody sort of feeling like they're curtailed with what they can ask.
Yeah. Wow. When you say you go in and decide not to be defensive, how do you do that? Because I could speak to so many leaders who are responsible for these sorts of meetings, and it's incredibly difficult not to be.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I think you have to, well, first of all, I sort of breathe a lot.
Yeah.
I think breathing, I went on a course a year or so ago, and as part of it was a residential course, and part of it was a very early morning meditation at sort of 6 a.m. And it was about learning to breathe. And I actually felt that it was probably the first time that I know it sounds crazy, but it was the first time I'd actually thought about my breathing and thought about how I breathe and the way I breathe. And so I really try and get as much air in my lungs as possible, and let my heart rate feel like it's slowing down and stay nice and calm. And then also know when it's the right time to push back a little bit, but always do so with respect and consideration for the person who has put forward the question or has made the point or has potentially criticized in some form. Because ultimately, and I said it last night, we want to be good neighbors as Ali Pali. There is no point in us upsetting the community that we serve. That's not why we're here. So I do need to absorb any feedback that we're receiving from that community, and then also give them the comfort that I'm taking it seriously, and it's not just going to be swept under the carpet and go back to them. And sometimes say when something can't happen, as much as saying that something can happen. So again, that constant communication and not just being dismissive of somebody's point of view.
Yeah. Thank you. Wow. What's the worst pressure you've ever been under, Emma?
So I think there was a moment in time in sort of 2014, late 2014, early 2015, when my second child, my son, was born. He was very unwell, sort of in and out of hospital, and for various reasons, the then leadership team of Ali Pali, of which I was part, left the organisation in a relatively short space in time, all at the same time. And there was this real clash of pressure. So this pressure on me to be back at work, and to take on the £27 million restoration project of the theatre, alongside, having an unwell child who literally hadn't slept since he was born, and it had been, quite traumatic. So I think, that experience of my two worlds colliding at such a pivotal point for both, that's definitely the most amount of pressure that I have, that I've experienced in terms of between, the two, personal and professional coming at the same time. And I think, again, that experience of coming through it. And, my son is very healthy now and, living a great life, and the theatre's award winning and having a great program. So, you can see at that moment in time, it didn't feel like either of those two things were going to be possible. But by really sort of almost embracing the pressure and just finding a way through it, great things have happened, and it's been incredibly successful.
So there are a couple of things in there. You said, get through it and embrace the pressure. I have to ask you how you do that, because I tell you that sort of scenario you've just described could crush one person, or certainly maybe not crush, but make different choices.
Yes, and I think that I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It definitely was a really difficult time in my life, and I also had an unbelievable commute. It was 1.5 hours each way across London, so I was spending 3 hours a day on the tube. And I remember I used to, I'd sort of get on the tube at Hammersmith and cry all the way to Wood Green. It wasn't a pretty sight, I could tell you. But I think in me, I just knew that it was going to be okay. And I think there's something in that. I think it's easy, and I still do it. You catastrophize, don't you? You go to that point of, the worst that can happen. But if you, again, just can try and visualize what's the best that could happen. And, and I think there's something in having a passion for what you do and feeling that purpose of what you do. So for me, the theatre was such an important part of Ali Pali's journey to becoming this cultural destination, which we all knew it had the ability to be, but we had to get this project across the line. There was no margin for error. There was no opportunity for failure. It just had to happen, and it had to be a success. And at the same time, my son had to be well cared for, looked after, and, supported so that he could also thrive. And I was fortunate in the fact that I have a phenomenal family, mum, once again, sacrificing a lot of her time to support. And that allowed me to basically do both. Now, I'm not saying I did both particularly well, maybe, but ultimately it led to success in both areas. So, yeah, I think, but I dug really deep during that time, definitely.
And that's such, again, another beautiful example of the passion that you felt for the end goal. I love that. And I think we all know that we can do extraordinary things.
Yeah.
When there's something that really lights us up. And that must have really, you must go into that theatre now and it must have such resonance for you, Emma.
Yeah, I'm incredibly proud of it. The team, again, the team of architects, the team we had behind the scenes who drove that project forward and drove it across the line. They are just, so clever, so smart, and, coming together as a team and delivering it in the way we did. And, it was fraught. It was fraught with challenges. Every single day, some other disaster had happened. And again, I think for most organizations that could have potentially broken them, but in a way it just seemed to make us stronger. I think we all got a bit belligerent that, no matter what this building threw at us, we were going to get through it. So no, I am incredibly proud. And of course, we're now home to Jules Holland. We have an incredibly thriving, diverse program. It's exceeded my wildest expectations and what it's achieved and what the team have done with it.
It is an incredible space, I have to say. And now that I know that story, it's going to have even more meaning to me when I walk into it. Really. And you said also in that story, Emma, which you glossed over, which I have to come back to, is that the whole of the exec team, or most of the people, left in that time as well.
Yes, they did. For various reasons. It was just a real sort of unlucky timing in a way. So there was four of us on the exec team, and basically in the space of about a month, they'd all left, and I was sort of last woman standing. So, yeah, and obviously this was, just as my son was, I mean, he would have been about 3 or 4 months old at that point. So, yeah, it was a difficult time, but there was also great people, who then came into the organisation, supported us. We rebuilt the team and the expertise, and and that's what took the project forward.
Do you think you could survive without pressure, Emma?
I'd be quite inquisitive as to what life looks like without it. I'm not sure I would enjoy it for that long, because, as I said, I feel I genuinely do thrive on it, and I find my energy from it, and I find my passion from it, and I think it's me. I think it's in me. I couldn't really imagine life without it, to be honest with you. We'd maybe have a few more kitchens. Still standing.
You'd find something to do to rearrange the house. Yeah. But I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that, when I spoke to you about coming onto this podcast, that's sort of what's underneath the title for me, that, you are such an incredible example of coming through high pressure, but feeling so much stronger as a result of it. And it's almost like it feels like a muscle that has been well used, but now it allows you to do all of these other things relatively Absolutely. In a fulfilling way, right? It's not like the pressure is unfulfilling. It feels incredibly fulfilling and enriching for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And attached to a building that is so fulfilling and enriching as well.
Yeah. And look, there is something incredibly special about working somewhere where I can literally look out of my window and see people enjoying what we do and what we deliver any given day of the week in any weathers. There's something quite unique about that, I think.
Actually, that's such a good point. When you work with teams and they say it's about we're really caring about our customer and delighting our customer, but a lot of the time you don't see that delight, but you're seeing it around you all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I hadn't thought of that. That's so good.
Yeah. And during the pandemic, we had a campaign we did a film which was about, can you imagine life without Ali Pali? And I actually had people coming up to me and say, I've just watched the film you've done and I've given money because I can't imagine life without Ali Pali. And it actually made me cry thinking about it. That was the kind of emotional reaction. And I think sometimes it's difficult for people who maybe haven't experienced this incredible place to really understand, what it means to people who do use it. Not only local people, but also people who come for our live music, or even people who come here every year for the darts, or come to our theatre, or use our ice rink on a daily basis. There's an incredible connection with this place that is so personal to people, and it means something to them, and it means something in their lives. And also it gets handed down from generations. I spoke to somebody the other day who was in her late 80s, and she talked to me about, how she had pushed her daughter around Ali Pali in the pram, and now she's pushing her great granddaughter around in the pram. There was this sort of incredible breadth of generations that have been pushed in their prams around Ali Pali, and it's sort of these stories that then this legacy that gets handed down through the family of this one place.
Yeah, wonderful. Oh, this is purpose energy, living and breathing as Emma talks. It's the energy that is fired up when we connect what we do to why it matters to others. I can feel her pride and love of Ali Pali and the meaning it has for the local community in particular. There's something profoundly powerful and fueling when you're lucky enough to experience daily the positive impact of your effort and hard work. In fact, this source of energy can support you in discovering more energy. This is part of its magic. It's the energy of meaning beyond self-interest, and it has the potential to galvanise all other energies to achieve far more than we thought possible. When something really matters to us, it provides a powerful source of motivation, focus, and determination. It can help us keep going even when things are out of our control. It's an incredible force. When I've witnessed people connect to the power of purpose, I've seen them move from invisible to invigorated, indecisive to incisive, strung out to strong, complacent to curious, feeling stuck to feeling significant. For anyone listening to this and thinking, I want to connect more to this energy in my life, or I want to offer more purpose energy to those I lead, the question is, how do we connect to it, particularly when we need it? It can all too easily be eclipsed by the drive to strive and to keep going, doing the doing, to get on with the daily tasks. How can we more intentionally connect to purpose energy? Well, here are a few questions that might ignite your purpose. When can you last remember connecting to this energy? How often do you intentionally connect and witness the impact of your efforts, product, or mission on others? Why does it matter to you? And who else will benefit? Sometimes we just have to keep asking those questions in order to shift from focusing on a goal to a much bigger and powerful purpose. So Emma, if there were two things that you would pass forward to anyone listening to this podcast who would like to be better under pressure, what would your first one be?
So I think there's definitely, and this is maybe coming from somebody who's sort of an operator, I think there's something about taking that step back and not so much doing, but the being. So, and not feeling guilty about it. I think there is something around our inherent need to feel busy. And this idea that you can actually take time out to just think at times feels a bit alien, as if people feel like, oh, but that's, I should feel guilty about doing that. And I think it's really important. And I think it's really important, particularly in this day and age where the volume of information that we are all taking in or being exposed to is overwhelming. It's just absolutely overwhelming for people. And so being able to say, do you know what, I'm going to just switch off a little bit now and not be overwhelmed and just be in myself is, I think, really important. And then the second one is
just before you go off on that one, Emma, I just wanted to think about that. When you said doing is the being bit, it also feels, as you were speaking earlier on, that the being for you is about being with people, literally like being. And maybe it's the four corners. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's got multi-meanings, that being for you.
Yes,
would that
absolutely.
be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's not just about just being on your own in a room thinking. It's also about spending time with people where you're just in their presence and you're listening to them and absorbing what they have to say and not rushing. Sometimes I've got a friend who I phone sometimes and I can tell that she's doing like 16 different things, and I'll say to her, what are you doing? And she's be like, oh well, I've just put the dishwasher on and I've just put the spaghetti on for the kids and now I'm going off to do it. And I said, just sit down and let's have a conversation without all of the clanking and all the rest of it in the background. And she always laughs and we have a bit of a joke about it, but I think there's something in that. You don't have to do a million one things at the same time. And if you just actually focus on one thing, then you will enjoy it more, and have a better experience ultimately.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And you were going to go on to the second one.
Yeah, so for me, network and friendship groups are incredibly important, and they have absolutely guided me through every single aspect of my life from a really young age. I've never been afraid to say that I don't know something. In fact, if anything, I'm always quite open about the fact that I'm not the expert in the room. And so I'm always quite happy to ask questions and to say, I don't know about this. Could you tell me? Or I seek out people that I know are potentially experts in an area and just say, will you come and talk to me about this? Or, if I know a friend has maybe gone through something that maybe I'm going through, ask if they're willing to talk about it. And also, pay it forward in the sense of if you can see someone else who you believe you can help or maybe provide some support to, be proactive. Don't wait for them to ask you. Offer it for them, because it will be enriching for both of you. I got approached recently by a woman in her early 20s, and so the email was very, oh, I'd love to come and talk to you about what you do, and I know you're very busy, and if you can make the time, and I just wrote back to her and I said, I'd love to meet you, and you know what, I will learn more from you than you are going to learn from me. And I think that's that is really important, just always seeing it as a two-way street. And how can you continue, just continuously challenge yourself to be curious about other people and finding out about them and what they do, and then hopefully also paying it forward as part of that network.
I love that. It reminds me of a phrase somebody I do a lot of work with says, if you're the biggest expert in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what you were just saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Emma, thank you so much. It's been such a great conversation, and I cannot wait to come and see Ali Pali again, especially as it's developing. It's a magical building.
Yeah, you'll have to come around in the summer as well. We'll do a tour in the summer. Maybe get you up on that roof when we open the skywalk.
I will definitely be there for the skywalk. Oh, yeah, very exciting. As will anyone else listening to this podcast who didn't know about the skywalk in the summer. Thank you so much.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Better Under Pressure with me, Sara Milne Rowe. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe and let us know what you found useful or what you'd like to know more about. And don't forget, if you'd like to sign up for our fortnightly Pressure Points newsletter, where I summarise key points from each conversation, you can find a link at saramilnerowe.com. If you're interested in any of the practices mentioned, check out my book, The Shed Method. Alternatively, you can find us at Coaching Impact or me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Better Under Pressure was produced by the fab team at Smart Cookie Media. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.